This is Writing Daily. Every day we talk about something writerly, whether it is a particular genre, whether it is putting yourself out into the universe, whether it is finishing your novel, writing your poetry, doing your treatment, whatever it is, we are here to help you. And there are some days where I have people to interview, which is very exciting. For those who don't know, my name is Devin Galaudet. I'm the editor-in-chief of In the Know Traveler, and I am also the author of the forthcoming book, 10,000 Miles with My Dead Father's Ashes. And today is one of the interview days. Today I have Alyssa Matuchniak. Did I do that okay?
You did great. That was brilliant.
Oh my gosh. So anyway, let me quickly, just so our audience at home, whether you're watching us on iTunes or Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, whether you're watching or listening, feel free to answer questions. I will answer them, or Alyssa will for today, and we will continue doing our thing. But just so you know who Alyssa is, let me pull up her bio. I'm having a difficult time finding it. It was here 1 second ago. So give me a second. Gosh darn it.
My stuff does have a habit of growing legs and walking away.
It's remarkable how that happened. Okay, well, how about this? I'm going to keep looking for it, Alyssa, but why don't you tell us the title of your book, because it is brand new, and you're a poet, correct?
I am. That is correct.
So what's happened? When did your book come out, and what is the title of your book?
So this release is brand new. This is the cover of my poetry book. We've got this beautiful illustration here done by a friend of mine from UC Santa Cruz. The book is called Small Wars, Little Revolutions, and I just published it about 2.5 weeks ago to the day. So this is hot off the press. I am so excited to be sharing it with you today.
Well, that is amazing. So how does it work? Because I know that poetry sometimes is a very challenging art form, not only for the reader, because it really requires you to read always, but also for the poet. In other words, it's first off, I love Mary Carr, and I also personally have my own experience with the great Emily Dickinson, where I spent basically 6 months working on a 50-page paper I had to do while getting my MFA. But so how is it to be sort of like live the life of a poet? Is it sort of like a full-time thing, or is it a labor of love, or something else?
I would say it's somewhere in between for me personally. I don't know that I will ever be like a fully working artist. I kind of enjoy that I get to balance my life between my career as a future educator as well as my vocation as a poet. I see those two things working in harmony and feeding off of each other. But to me, the life of a poet is sort of, I don't know that it's that much different than leading a regular life, but I think it's almost being a more careful observer of whatever that dailiness of your life looks like. And so for me, a lot of the work of poetry is kind of something that's not particularly visible to anybody else except myself, right? I carry notebooks in my backpack. I have a digital note section on my phone. And anytime anything comes, whether it's a line or an image, or even if it's something silly like a joke I heard or a conversation I hear between a mother and her child, anything that I hear that I think could be useful I'm just writing it down. And I don't think that necessarily makes the life of the poet special. It's just that the work that you do as almost a scientific observer of everything around you, that's what makes a poet, for me, at least.
Well, I think that's a wonderful description. First off, I found your bio, so I want to absolutely make sure that we read it. So Alyssa Matuchniak is a Southern Californian emerging on the poetry scene. A second-generation biracial American, the daughter of an Indian mother and an English-Polish father. She attends the Master's in Teaching program at UCI and dreams of becoming that kind of weird but cool English teacher you hear about in stories. Her work deals primarily with questions of mixed race, identity, the space of the female body, and the meaning of home. Her debut book, Small Wars, Little Revolutions, was published by World Stage Press in May of 2018. Her poems have been previously published in Black Napkin Press. That is very, very impressive.
Thank you.
So now that we have your definition of poetry, and by the way, I kind of always like to throw in there that for me is poetry tends to be sort of like the reduction sauce of writing. And I'm not trying to belittle it in any way, but it seems like you have to kind of write out every single unnecessary word or thought that does not relate to the experience at hand on the emotional level. And so I imagine I've attempted my hand at poetry. I can't say that it is my strength because I don't know if I have the ability to boil things down in the way that people like yourself do. I had the pleasure of reading your poetry last night, and I think you're crazy, wonderfully talented. Okay, before we get into your crazy, wonderful, talented section, can you tell me how you arrived and what does sort of like Small Wars, Little Revolutions mean to you? How did that come to be?
Absolutely. So sometimes I get these funny dreams, but I don't know how to explain them until much later in life. I wouldn't necessarily call them premonitions or precognition, but they're just these flashes or flickers, and I know that I have to hang on to them and that they'll explain themselves to me later. And so I remember maybe 2 years ago, I was in a very different place in my life. I worked for a tech company in the Bay Area, and I was miserable. I hated my job. I was really unhappy. I didn't fit in, and I was just having a rough time of it. And one day, like as I was editing some work, the title for the book flew into my head, just this phrase, Small Wars, Little Revolutions. And I remember it hitting me, and I felt the weight of it, but I didn't know what it meant yet. But I wrote it down and said, well, eventually, this is normal for me. This will explain itself to me when the time is right. And about 6 months later, when I was getting ready to leave that job, I got an email from a friend of mine in the Long Beach poetry scene. Her name is Nancy Lene Wu. She's a brilliant poet, brilliant community organizer. And she wrote an email to me saying, hey, listen, I heard about this writing workshop in Los Angeles called the Community Literature Initiative. They work with the World Stage Press. They're based out of Leimert Park. And they're putting on a publishing class for poets, for fiction writers, for memoirists. And the goal is that within 9 months, you not only generate new work, but you put a manuscript together. And that's when I knew, oh, that's what the title is. It's for this thing. So I have to apply to this program and I have to do something that makes this title worthwhile. And so I applied to the program and I got in, and that's actually what helped me to make this book a reality. And so as I was writing and generating new work for the book, slowly over time, I realized that I had been asking myself these questions about what it means to be a mixed race person, what it means to grow up from a multi-faith background, what it means to be female, and potentially as well what it means to be exploring all of these different intersections of the ways that we define identity as they map out onto the body. I realized as I was writing that I kept returning to a lot of language to do with the body, to do with selfhood, to do with discovery and questioning. And so I felt that, okay, this title is all about how your body or how you frame the world around you is this daily little revolution that you have to fight for every waking moment. And that to me was a tiny miracle. So that's kind of the story of that title.
That's a great story. And I want to say that after reading some of your work, that I have to say it is very rich. And I guess that's part of sort of the reduction sauce, the terrible analogy that I insist on using. And, I want to tell a little story and I kind of brought this prop out. We sort of talked about it a little bit before we got started, is that, I was raised with poetry, and I've discussed this before. My mother used to prop me up and read, Edna St. Vincent Millay, and I mean, very sort of like things that rhymed mostly.
Yes.
And I remember kind of running from it because, it's mom. I'm sort of like running from mom. And I remember sitting in a writing class by a professor named Ed Frankel, who I think is an absolute genius, a super smart guy. And I remember him making a comment in some class basically saying, and he did this, he said, here we've got William Shakespeare and here we've got Emily Dickinson.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of surprised me because I don't know. I mean, I knew of Emily Dickinson as sort of like this shut-in kind of weird sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right. And at some point when I spoke to him, he's like, dude, you have to study Emily Dickinson. If you want to understand writing, you have to study Emily Dickinson. If you want to understand creativity, and he started listing out all the things that she talked about and what you just described now in terms of identity. And she explored really hard topics that were not discussed in the 1880s.
Right.
She did things. She was, dare I say, she was a feminist. She talked about death. She talked about her body. She talked about, and then she was certainly a revolutionary when it came to punctuation. Are there people like Emily Dickinson that kind of make a difference to your writing, that inspire you to kind of allow your richness to soar as you do?
Well, it's funny that you bring up Emily Dickinson, because Emily Dickinson is 110% like one of my greatest inspirations. I think the first poet I ever truly read as a child growing up was Emily Dickinson. I think it was I'm Nobody, Who Are You? That was the first poem that ever really captured my attention, with its wonder, with its whimsy, with its kind of playfulness and yet a very serious and haunting undertone. And I remember even as a child just being blown away, as you said, by the richness that she brings to language, and yet in such a tight space, what worlds she's able to manifest. And so even though I don't necessarily read like Emily Dickinson every night before I go to bed, she is a poet that I will return to every couple of years when I feel that the well has run dry, or that I'm not confident in my ability to build a little world on the page. I return to Emily Dickinson. And she's fascinating in particular because the more that I read some of her other work, whether it's her unpublished pieces or whether recently I've been reading a lot of the letters that she used to write to the master, this mysterious male figure in her life who's still his identity is nebulous, as well as the 36 years of correspondence that she shared with her sister-in-law, which also brought up this question of Emily Dickinson's sexuality to the table. Just returning to her over and over again, I find that as my understanding of her work grows and her life grows, my understanding of myself grows. So I definitely think Emily Dickinson is somebody I also turn to. Lately, I've also been looking at a lot of other female mixed race poets as well for inspiration. I know when I was writing a lot of my own work, I felt very alone and isolated and like nobody else was doing this. And until about 2016, when I found this poem that had won the Rattle Poetry Prize online. The poem is called Equilibrium by a mixed race poet named Tiana Clark, based out of Nashville. She's half black, half white. And the first line, or the first sentence of the poem is, "Took me 30 years to say, I'm glad I don't pass for white." And with that one sentence, I was like, oh, just knocked off my feet. With one sentence, this woman could blow me open and could see everything that I felt like I was struggling with and figuring out how to identify myself. And so she opened up a whole new world for me. Her chapbook, Equilibrium, is one that I keep in my backpack at all times. It's always on me when I'm feeling low, when I'm feeling like I've run out of language to express what is manifesting in my lived and embodied experience. I turn to Tiana Clark. So she's quite brilliant as well. But even other than that, just reading any poets that people recommend to me. I'm a big Claudia Rankine fan. I'm really enjoying Sharon Olds. I also just finished reading what's her name? Patricia Smith's Blood Dazzler. It was such an incredible book. So anything that people recommend to me, I try to keep it as open as possible, because you never know who in the poetry world is out there that has something to teach you.
So along the same lines, when you talk about yourself, there is an intensity.
Yes.
There is an intensity, and obviously you get what I'm saying. I'm probably,
Yes.
I'm perhaps even using gentle words to, to describe your writing. Have you ever been concerned about, writing something that might be too intense, or are there lines in the sand for you as an artist that you question whether or not you should be crossing that line? Or because obviously, as writers, we put this stuff out there to be seen by the world.
Mm-hmm.
So did you ever go through a moment where there was something like, wow, I don't know if I want to go that far?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a very long piece in this book called "You Don't Look Indian," which is a phrase that has been thrown my way more times than I can count in my entire life. And as it didn't bother me as a kid because I didn't understand what people were saying. But once I hit about 19, 20, that started to really get to me. And so I remember just one night in a frenzy writing this frantic, angry, 4-part poem where I pick apart each word of the phrase and expand it into its own part of a poem. And I remember reading that first draft and going, "Oh, I'm gonna get in trouble for some of this." Because it's kind of nasty, it's kind of gritty, I'm not a very angry person. I am a very passionate person, a very intense person, but my anger and my bitterness are things I keep usually quite close to my heart. I don't usually like to show those things. And this piece just laid that all bare, how angry I was, how bitter I was, and possibly too, how wrong I was. Any conversation that you have about race is always going to be fraught with the additional tension of what the larger community thinks about the discussion of race. And so I was taking something for the first time that was very, very personal and putting it up to the mirror of the larger political question of race and being mixed or being half and half. So that was a very scary moment for me, especially because, look, the reality is because I'm so pale skinned, because of my name, because I was born and raised in America, I have a ton of white privilege. There's no getting around that. And so I was very nervous to write this poem in which I seemed to be lamenting something that perhaps to the rest of the world doesn't look like it affects my life. And I was very afraid of being judged for that. I was very afraid of not being understood. But at the same time, I feel like you have to take those risks. Art is a conversation, right? The minute I put that poem out into the world, it no longer belongs just to me. It's absolutely belongs to readers as well, for them to engage with. And that goes for any poem you write, even the ones that you don't feel scared about. So I felt like, well, if I'm okay with writing all these other pieces and understanding that it's okay to let them go and let them be their own conversations with readers, then I have to do the same thing with the poems that scare me the most. And that's not always easy. I've definitely written poems recently where I'm like, and that will never see the light of day, for sure. But I'm trying to let go of that fear that art has to be clean and perfect and that it has to mirror things that are going on in the larger community. It's okay for things to be rough. It's okay for things to contest with larger social conversations. That's the whole point of art. What are we doing if we're not pushing and pulling and prodding and trying to figure things out? So
with that said, I think there's two components going on. There's one that is you're writing this because you are inspired to write it. And then there's this part where it's sort of going out into the world and going to be meeting new eyes.
Mm-hmm.
When you work on something, are you purely focused on the idea of the art it is for you that you are creating? Or is it like, I need to jump into this social political landscape to have my voice heard? Or is it some other combination of both or something completely different?
I do think it's a combination of both. There are certain pieces in here that I think I very deliberately wrote to join a larger conversation. I have a piece in here called "Is It Okay If?" that is a direct response to a story that happened in the news. It was a couple of years ago. I'm not sure how familiar people will be with this, but I think it was an art student at either Columbia or NYU. She claimed she had been raped by a German exchange student, and the university did nothing about it, did nothing to mitigate the damage that was done to her. And so for the rest of the year, she did this interesting performance art piece where she carried the mattress that supposedly he raped her on her back with her every day to every class, so that nobody could avoid looking at the tangible evidence of what had happened in this woman's life. And it was a big conversation when I was in college, all across my campus. So I wrote a piece directly responding to that event, because I felt like not only was that something very personal, also as a woman, that is something that I fear for in my own daily life, but this is something that happens on a national and even international scale. And I felt that I wanted to jump in and join that conversation, especially on an issue that is so important to me. That being said, there are also pieces I have in here that start as something very personal, and I think nobody's going to get this, who cares, whatever. And then when I read them in the world, I'm always shocked to find that there are a couple new people who will say, hey, me too. Hey, me too. That also happens to me. I also feel this way. So I think it works in both ways. There are definitely times when I sit down to write and I have a clear intention for what I want this work to do and what conversation I want that work to join. And then I definitely have other pieces where the conversations come my way, where I'm not intentionally looking to start a type of dialogue, but one happens anyway by virtue of the art being made. So you never know, which is kind of half the fun of writing.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of your book, how did that come together in terms of how did you choose the poetry for it? And was there a particular theme that was kind of the underpinning of the whole writing that made it work? How did you kind of put this collection together?
Well, definitely, I think if there's any theme that underlies the whole thing, it's this idea of liminal spaces, of living in between categories, of living in between cultures, living in between bodies, even to a certain extent. In the dedication to my book is a quote that my mother had heard from her mother when she was growing up, and she passed it on to me. My mom grew up in a mixed faith family. Her father was a practicing Zoroastrian and her mother was a practicing Hindu, which are two kind of fundamentally incompatible religions, but they got married and they made a relationship work and they had a family and zippity-doo-dah, right? But there was a lot of tension surrounding that in larger communities. But my grandparents always made sure to tell my mother, you are twice blessed. And so she passed that message on to me growing up as a mixed race child, saying, you are twice blessed. And so for me, the theme of the book is when you feel lost in these liminal spaces, when you feel pulled apart by multiple categories or multiple identities or even multiple groups of people trying to sort you and compartmentalize you, remember that essential truth that you are twice blessed or thrice blessed, whatever the situation happens to be. So for me, again, the whole title with things being little revolutions is that the choice that you make every day to say, I am comfortable in this liminal space. I will live here. I will make a bridge of myself. I don't need to choose. I don't need to compartmentalize. That's the revolution. That's the tiny miracle, that's the war that you have to fight every single day. And that is true for people, I think, no matter how you identify or where you feel your body lies on any particular spectrum. So I think that for me was kind of the driving message of the work, is always remembering that you get to choose to be the bridge between whatever categories other people are trying to put you in.
So to kind of move forward a little bit, and I think this is always sort of an important thing, as you now have your book out, and you said it's only been a couple of weeks, how is it that you are putting yourself out there? Obviously, the whole goal, I would argue, is the necessary thing, is that you go out and you sell your books. You make sure you find the people who are going to benefit from your writing and you get it into their hands. And I don't know if there's a master class really for any of it. I think you just have to go out in there and do it. Is there something that you are consciously doing now or plan to be doing in the immediate term to kind of get your word and your message out there?
So at the moment, what I'm doing right now, I use social media channels to kind of promote what I'm doing. I use Instagram a lot to post poems that I've written in my book, as well as poems that I just am writing throughout. I try to mix it up a little bit so it's not all the same. So I'll frequently post poems from this. I will frequently post poems that I've written for National Poetry Writing Month challenges that I've done in the past. I'll also occasionally, just to kind of have some fun and show people what the process looks like, I'll take pictures of the notes section on my phone where I have what I call these poetic sketches that are just nonsense lines or scribbles or whatever. And I'll post those and be like, this is what I was thinking at the time. This is what happened in my day. So I wrote this, and share it with people. So that's kind of fun too, because for me, that's a way for people to get to know me as an artist and a person rather than just knowing my work. So I try to incorporate both elements. I also am really, really big about getting out and reading as much as I can. It's been kind of difficult this year with graduate school and with teaching. So I'm really looking forward to summer coming around the corner so that I have more time to go out to my usual readings. But I've just been trying to get out there as much as I can. I frequent the Ugly Mug in Orange. I also try to go to the Definitive Soapbox reading a lot, which is a once a month reading on the last Friday of every month up in Long Beach. They're a great group of people. They're very supportive.
Where is that? Because I'm in Long Beach.
Oh, it's at Fox Coffee House last Friday of every month.
That is like literally, I live 1 block away.
Do you really? Well, you got to come out sometime. You are missing out on a great scene.
No, I totally need to be aware of that. Okay, so
yes.
please go on. I apologize.
Sure. No, I'm so glad. Well, I can't wait to see you there next time. Where else? Probably those are my 2 most frequent haunts. One place I really want to get around to a little bit more is the Poetry Lounge up in Los Angeles. I'll be moving for a job soon. I'll be moving closer to Long Beach, so I'm hoping that living there will get me a little bit closer to these communities that I've made, my writing community up in Los Angeles, as well as my writing community in Long Beach. And that's kind of it. I have a couple cool things coming up. A friend of mine who also lives in Long Beach, her name is Sarah Tatro. Her poetry name is Sarah Thursday. She's starting a summer reading series in her house called Poets and Plates, and I'll be one of the first featured readers for that. That's on June 10th. I'm doing a second book release party at the end of the summer at the Ugly Mug, because that's kind of my special, like my first poetry home in my heart on the stateside. So that will be on August 15th. I'm really looking forward to that. Other than that, I just try to keep booking as many gigs as I can through friends. That's sort of the best way to go. I'm definitely like a word of mouth person.
So what is are you working on anything now? And when you're working on it, is it more of, I'm working on a particular poem that eventually becomes a collection, or is it that I have this underpinning theme that is rattling around in me and you start writing towards that? And are you working on a new collection or a new book?
I'll be honest, at the moment, I am booked out. So this process has been beautiful, but it has been very draining. And so right now I feel like I did the poetry gig backwards, right? Like usually most people submit to journals for a while first, and then they put a chapbook together, then they put a full-length book together. I didn't do any of that. Like I just got really lucky and I joined a program that supports putting a program or a book together. And so that's what I did. But I'm really hoping to just take this year to kind of submit individual pieces that I've been writing just in my own time to journals and magazines and build my name up in those spaces. That's kind of my goal for the upcoming years, just kind of being submission queen for a little while and seeing how that goes.
That is, I think that's terrific. I think it's terrific. And you're young, right?
Yes, I am. I'm 24. I'm 24 years old.
Wow, you are young. So I'm assuming you're probably comfortable with things like Twitter and Instagram. As a middle-aged person,
I think I missed the Twitter boat a little bit. I do have one, but I admit it's not my favorite social media networking site. I do really like Instagram a lot. I post there pretty frequently. So that's usually the best way to find me. I'm working on building an author website. I am not there yet. But as soon as I am, I will let you know.
No, good. So matter of fact, since we're on that subject, and this is sort of like, you have to do it.
Yeah,
you have to do it.
You do.
You do have to do it. And I think you have to go get, and I would like, go do it when we get off this phone, as you go get Alyssa Matuchniak .com.
Yes. And I don't think it'll be too hard to get.
Well, you don't know. Here's the thing. By the way, you never search it in like GoDaddy or anything like that, and then wait a week. You search it and buy it immediately.
Gotcha.
Because they have bots that will see what's been searched, and they'll just buy it out from under you because...
Oh, wow. That's awful.
They can. No, it's actually fairly hideous. So you don't want to, allow them to be hideous to you. So I do suggest that you go out and do that as soon as possible. Okay, so where's the next place you're going to be? other than, and we should get your Twitter name, right? I think, do we have that?
Yes. I think I emailed it to you. Yeah. So should be.
Okay, so the Instagram handle I have is Little Mermaid Lily. Is that
Yeah,
about right? No
that is
space,
correct.
and that's
Correct.
Lily with
Two
double
E's.
E's. Yes.
Yep, that's a nickname.
So I'm going to spell that out. So it is the @ symbol LITTLEMERMAIDLEELEE. And so, of course, that would also be what would be tacked on the end of Instagram.com, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And so for somebody who is interested, so that's how they could like communicate with you directly, right? That's one of
Yes,
the
absolutely.
social media. And if somebody is interested in your book, Small Wars, Little Revolutions, where do they have some options to track that quality, rich writing down?
Absolutely. So you can either buy it from the press's website that published me. It's just worldstagepress.org. It should be one of the first books up on their product page. So there's one option there. It's also available on Amazon. If you just go in Amazon and search the title, Small Wars, Little Revolutions, it should be the first book that pops up.
And if they see you live somewhere, if you're doing a reading, you bring books for that as well?
I do, yeah. I carry at least 20 books in my car at any given time.
You have to, right?
You have to.
Okay, so by the way, if you've been watching with us, I hope you've been liking, clicking the wow button, sharing this page, so people know where to find Alyssa and her really beautiful work. And I'm absolutely going to make sure that I have all this information linked out so people can track Alyssa you down quite easily. Is there anything else that is going on? Like, do you have kind of a schedule in your head? Like, okay, I'm all booked out, but in 6 months or in 5 years or in something else, or maybe you're just going to be 24 for a while and not worry about this stuff.
I have a few readings coming up, like the ones that I mentioned. A friend of mine is also starting a new reading series. I think she's calling it On the Rocks, where poets will take a shot on stage, spit out a random haiku via audience suggestion, and then launch into their set. So she's starting that reading up at D Piazzas in Long Beach as well. I will be reading there on June 20th. So I'm really looking forward to that. I have never in my life taken a shot, so we're going to see how that goes.
Oh, if it's never been... Well, yeah, you may want to practice before.
Yeah. I have a feeling I'm going to need to.
No, you'll be fine. Okay, so anyway, again, let me just reiterate what we've got here. We have been talking with Little Mermaid Lily, better known as Alyssa Matuchniak. Her book, Small Wars, Little Revolutions, is now out and published by World Stage Press as of May, and you can track her down on Instagram and Twitter, which is Alyssa_Lily. Does that sound about right?
That is correct.
And of course, also available on Amazon and probably other fine bookstores, I imagine, as well, correct?
I hope so. We'll find out the fun way.
I guess we'll find out, yeah. So anyway, anything else that we need to know about you?
I think that's it for right now. Just keep your fingers crossed for me as I submit like a fiend for the next year.
Keep doing it, because that, honestly, this is the stuff that people need to know, is that this is how you get it done. If you're a writer at home and you have your work in a shoebox or stuck on some thumb drive, it really is time to kind of brush it off, take a quick pass at it and start getting it out into the world, because that's really the only way they find out about you.
Absolutely, yes. I'm going to start putting myself out there. I'm really excited about it.
I think it's wonderful, Alyssa. Alyssa, by the way, thank you so much for being here and being so crazy, articulate, and talented, and all of those kinds of things. I'm going to be looking forward to reading more of your work real soon.
Well, thank you, Devin, for having me. It's been a real treat.
Oh, well, it's been my pleasure. And so, as always, if you're into poetry, write. Do it, keep doing it, and love it. Get your work done. This is a process, and it's a process that I love, whether you are writing your poems or you're finishing your novel or your short story collection or whatever it is. Just keep Writing Daily. That's why I named that title. And as always, make sure that you hit the like button and the share button and the wow button and all the buttons, and feel free to leave comments. And as always, if you've missed something that we've done, know that we're here every day. I'm on iTunes. Feel free to subscribe. And I do all kinds of fun giveaways at devingallaudet.com/dad. More on that tomorrow. And we'll be here tomorrow because we're going to keep writing daily. Anyway, that's what I've got for today. Thank you so much again, Alyssa. And it's been a great pleasure. And I'll talk to you guys all real soon. Thanks so much.